Hello, it is November 19th, and it is snowing.
We will be talking about the adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
In chapter 24 of Huckleberry Finn, Jim's upset that he always has to wait back tied up, and he's afraid that he's going to be founded as a runaway slave. So the Duke dresses up Jim as an Arab, and he puts a sign on him saying that he's sick but he's not harmless. And then on their way, they meet a young man who tells them about Mr. Wilkes, who has recently passed away and is giving all his money to two uncles that one is deaf and mute and the other he hasn't talked to as a child. So it looks like there is no one that's probably going to take the money. So on their way, they eventually get to the town, and Huck, the Duke, and the Dolphus end up meeting the family, and they think that the Duke and the Dolphus were the two people that need to inherit the money, and this makes Huck so sick. It was enough to make a body ashamed of the human race. This quote is ironic because Huck's a white man and he's talking about two other white men who were acting like they deserve to inherit money because they're friends of Mr. Wilkes. But in reality, they're just as bad as that time period's supposed black people, even though they're white and they're supposed to be good. In this chapter, Huck learns that the Duke and the King were not very good people because they pretend to inherit money that wasn't really theirs.
In chapter 25, the Duke and Dolphin pose as Wilkes' uncles. Wilkes leaves behind a note and leaves $3,000 to each of his two nieces. With that is also the estate, which is worth almost double the $6,000. The Duke and Dolphin count the money along with and alone, and when it comes up short, they even add $415 of their own money to make it look like they're not frauds. Then they put on a big show in front of the entire town, handing the sisters the $6,000. But Dr. Robinson, who was an old friend of the Wilkes family, calls out Duke and the Dolphin, saying they are frauds because of their poor accents. But the oldest sister, Mary Jane, doesn't listen and gives it to the Duke and Dolphin to invest as they please. In this chapter, although he goes along with the Duke and the Dolphin schemes, Huck still looks at them as evil and notices what they are doing is bad. It also hits on the moral confusion throughout the story. When even though the doctor warns the sisters of the imposters, she still stupidly hands over the money. On page 166, it says, "But I warn you all that times coming when you are going to feel sick whenever you think of this day." This quote really foreshadows the trouble the Duke and Dolphin, as well as Huck, will begin to have in the chapter. Also in this chapter, they had a hypocritical moment when Mary Jane didn't listen to a well-respected, knowledgeable doctor, but she listened to the Duke and Dolphin, people they barely even know anything about. In chapter 26, the Dolphin and Duke arrange to stay at the Wilkes' house. When the Duke and the Dolphin and Huck have supper with the Wilkes sisters, Joanna tests Huck's knowledge of England many times, and he makes lots of slips, forgetting that he is from Sheffield and the Dolphin is supposed to be a minister. Finally, Joanna just asks if they made the entire thing up and if they're frauds, but her sisters, Mary Jane and Susan, interrupt and say that Joanna is being very rude and just disregard the entire thing. Huck feels terrible about letting such a nice woman be fooled, and he resolves to get them their money back. He goes into the Duke's room to search for money, and he hides when they enter. The Duke wants to leave town that night, but the Dolphin convinces him to stay until they have stolen all the family's property. After the men leave the room, Huck finds the $6,000 and he takes it to his sleeping cubby and then sneaks out late at night.
In page 170 of Huckleberry Finn, Huck says, "I see it weren't none but a dictionary, so I laid my hand on it." In this quote, Huck's talking about he's laying his hand on a Bible, but he doesn't realize that swearing to a Bible is like actually a big deal to other people because he's not very religious. And in chapter 26 of Huckleberry Finn, it's ironic how Huck is upset with Adolphus and the Duke, how they're acting like they're the uncles of Mary and the hair lip, even though he's just as bad for not telling them that they're acting like that.
Huck hides the money in a coffin to save the money, and during the funeral, the undertaker comes down to shut up a dog, and Huck tries to retrieve the money, but the undertaker seals the coffin. He says that he can just ask Mary to dig up the coffin at a later date, and also the Dauphin sends a slave mother to New Orleans, and Huck knows this is wrong, but he thinks that the family will just be reunited at a later date. And Huck tells the conman that the slaves stole the money, so he will not get in trouble. The essence of this chapter is it shows that Huck is becoming more sympathetic towards the slaves, and he's becoming a better person. Also, it is important because he loses the money, but he knows that he can get it back. And he also pins the loss of the money on the slaves to the conman, but he knows that the slaves will not be harmed because of it. Page 180, Huck thinks, I felt dreadfully glad that I worked it all out onto the niggers, and yet hadn't done the niggers no harm by it. This is showing how Huck is becoming more humane towards the blacks and the slaves.
28. Mary's upset over the separation of the slave family, and Huck feels bad and blurts out that the family will be together in less than 2 weeks. Mary is very excited about that, and he asks Huck to tell her why. Huck tells her the truth and tells Mary to go stay at a friend's house so Huck can get away. Huck tells Mary to leave without seeing her family because her family would find out the secret. Huck leaves a note for Mary on where to find the money he left. A little after Mary leaves, the sisters see Huck, and Huck tells them Mary went to see a sick friend. Mary's sisters are suspicious, so Huck tells them to keep quiet about it. Later on, a mob interrupts the auction of Mary's family's possessions, and two of the men claim to be the real Harvey and William Wilkes. After is that he tells Mary Jane to leave, and he tells her where all the money he stored was, so she can go get it. That means that he cares about her, and the mob that came is not good for the family because those are bad men. The wishful quote in this chapter is, I'm awful sorry, Miss Mary Jane. I'm just as sorry as I can be, but I done the best I could. I did honest. This shows that Huck really cares about Mary.
Harvey Wilkes explains why he was late because of his luggage was misdirected, and his brother broke his arm, leaving him unable to communicate because he is a mute. The Duke and Dauphin are accused of being frauds, and they can't produce the $6,000 because the Dauphin refuses to give his signature, and the real William cannot due to his broken arm. They are unable to tell which one is real. They resolve this by talking of a tattoo on his brother's chest. When the Dauphin and Harvey have two different descriptions, the Undertaker says there is no tattoo. Huck escapes when a mob arises due to this, and Huck steals a canoe and makes off with Jim until he sees the Duke and Dauphin. The importance of this chapter is that it shows they are onto the Duke and Dauphin, that they could be frauds. Also, Huck gets away in the mob and finds Jim, and they are about to set off